Thank you very much. Well, I confront you with this completely compelling image of Australopithecus afarensis, a distant forebear of ours. The reason I'm very, very fond of Australopithecus afarensis is that he, she, they got technology. He, she, they were shaping tools to tame their environment. They were dealing with technology 3.5 million years ago. In fact, as far as we can tell, even before Homo sapien arrived, 200,000 generations of hominids were busy shaping technology, and the technology was literally shaping them. Our opposable thumbs, the fine motor control, the argument is that much of our cerebral organization, potentially coordination, language planning, was all driven by the exquisite tool-making culture that we became. And in fact, of course, we use that technology to tame our world, to gain mastery over that world. This is not a new thing. Technology has shaped us just as we have shaped it. And of course, the latest incarnation of that is the extraordinary fact of the computing power we have at our disposal. I guess the thing to understand is how far all of this really relates in terms of our ability to edit ourselves. Our technology now so advanced, our understanding of our own genomic composition so great that we may actually literally edit our own operating system. But this is to reflect the famous Moore's law, the fact that we can be very, very overtaken by the exponential linear rates of change, the fact that our machines and our processing power, our communication rates double every 15 months or so. That can lead to extraordinary disruptive events. The smartphones in our pockets, and I use the iPhone as an exemplar, the chip in there, all of you, many of you technologists will be kind of aware of this, but it's extraordinary to understand what that represents in terms of an achievement. The mass collaboration, the fundamental interdependence of our tools, our technologies, our extraordinary light-based etching capabilities to make these tools, to make tools whose features at the basic level are 15 nanometers across. 15 nanometers, those items that drive your smartphone, much of it full of AI software, you could fit 450 of those features inside a single red blood cell. And it takes an active imagination to understand what this is doing to us and to our world. And of course, what it's doing to our world is allowing us to carry around supercomputers, computers that can run the products of AI's achievements over the last 4 or 5 decades on those devices with huge network effects, whether it's Siri, whether it's voice recognition, the ability to pull up almost an answer to any question you might give it off the huge connected knowledge base that is the web, drive our cars or perform robotic surgery. These are products of AI. And the thing, I love the quote from John McCarthy, one of the founding fathers of our subject, said, "Today's AI is tomorrow's computer science." We are living through an era where the continuing digital revolution is working its way through. It's putting extraordinary power in our pocket. And periodically, we panic. Some high point of human endeavor is conquered by the machine. This is 1996, 97, when Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. He famously said at the time, he played a lot of chess computers, but this time he smelt a new kind of intelligence across the table. Actually, of course, what we know is that Deep Blue was a triumph of supercomputing. It was evaluating hundreds of millions of positions per second. It had a huge database of opening and closing and mid-game positions. And in some respects, it actually literally unnerved Kasparov. And at the time, people were writing, and they had a decade earlier, that the machines were coming, they'll be waking up anytime soon, and they were going to put you out of a job, okay? This is not a new trope. As we go through and we see this wide, pervasive deployment of technology, we worry about everything from surveillance to automatic facial recognition at scales we couldn't imagine, things that we would legitimately should be concerned about. Some combination of the latest work in neural networks and a mad, bad, and dangerous to know computer, which goes back quite a long way. Of course, there's the HAL 9000, Terminator, this ruthless killing machine, terrifies the crap out of a lot of people. Where are we really? Well, I've been saying for a number of years that there are things to worry about in AI, but most of them originate in our own hands. It's not the machines waking up and putting away with us. It's actually rather harder to produce a general AI than most people are alleging or thinking. But the real problems are real problems, as I shall currently intimate. Now, why would I put a picture of a chemical process, for those of you who might recognize this, from about 30 years ago on a screen full of presentations of the latest, shiniest technology? I want to illustrate 3 features of why general AI is hard. Harder than just down the road in a few years. Common sense is possibly a good place to start. This was a system that we built 30 years ago. It takes the diagram on the left, which is a specification, a logical specification for a particular chemical process, and it laid out in a grainy CAD-like way a 3-dimensional structure. That process works not by training on hundreds of thousands of chemical plants, but by the explicit description of rules and constraints about how far you need to position things apart if you gain access, or what the actual regulations say you can and can't do. But fundamentally, it contains some common sense engineering knowledge that no amount of exposure can actually induce. It's the fact that in the original diagram, there were no pumps described in a particular part of the process. And what the engineer does, the human engineer, they realized you've got to place the tanks higher than the place you get the fluid. And what happens? Gravity happens, okay? That is not in the specification on the left, okay? So there's huge amounts of our common understanding of the world, which is rooted in that. And it's always been a challenge for AI to understand and regularize that. The other thing that we're well aware of is that our latest fantastically powerful set of methods based in deep neural networks are not particularly brilliant at this point in time as explanation machines of accounts of how the weight matrix has come exactly to the conclusion it has in such a way that you might be able to satisfy a court of law or a litigant as to why did the system operate in that way. So there are challenges around why we will need to explain the reasonings of our systems, and we're going to need at that point a combination of our good old-fashioned symbolic AI and our latest powerful methods in machine learning. The other thing is that there are huge numbers of features of the actual cerebral cortex that we're not exploiting yet. And there are huge numbers of aspects of that multi-layer structure that has evolved over hundreds of millions of years that play no part in our characterization of our systems, from the cerebellum to the actual endocrine system, the system that gives us our emotional states, to the system that gives us our intentional states at all, the fact that we have goals, that we have social relationships. All of that is not yet inside our programs. And that system is also capable of a very special feature, which is task transfer. We learn to see the similarities from one task to another. We use our learning to inform whole other aspects of what we do. That is not to say never, but the general mechanization of all this anytime soon is actually harder than we think. But there are lots of things to worry about. And just briefly, and we should be impressed, as we are when we see Watson with that fantastic ability to call on rules and reasoning, Bayesian calculations, a whole database of facts at its disposal, machine learning over all the questions that Jeopardy had ever asked, or the extraordinary achievements of AlphaGo that beat the world's best Go player. That same frissons, the same look on his face actually as Gary Kasparov had, as they see the machine achieving preeminence in specific tasks. But the general challenge of common sense, of general task transfer, these are hard problems. And even though we can see extraordinary, brilliantly compelling demonstrations, latest Boston Dynamics, there he is trotting around. You only have to fit this out with a reasonable kind of automatic rifle, and you can get really scared. And we should. So in the face of these remarkable achievements, the correct discussions to have are around the ethics of deploying these systems without humans in the loop. There are genuine questions about whether or not we're content to have the intelligent Alexas and other home hub helps collecting all this information and shipping out we know not where. There are really spooky things to think about when we put AI into our smart toys, and Teddy is having a conversation with your child, possibly gathering all sorts of interesting information. How are we going to modulate and moderate? And how will the child bond with that device? Whilst there's no one at home in the digital circuits yet of Teddy, there is in the child, and the child will become bonded and form a significant relationship to objects and companions that are digital in nature. How are we going to deal with that? Now, the work, have I addressed the issue of work? Well, briefly in about the next minute or so. This is a naked kind of advert, really, for just to qualify ourselves a little bit in thinking about where we are in AI. The other great thing to consider is data. Where our data's going. All of the ML techniques are driven by an voracious appetite for data. That's just one app, Airbnb, with that information set, shipping your data out through a whole range of intermediaries you know not where. That's a set of analysis that we're undertaking at Oxford. Very interesting to do that for upwards of 1 million apps now to see what the data landscape looks like. So at the Open Data Institute, a final plug, we've been working out how we live in this spectrum of open through to closed data. Hugely material questions. These are the questions that should seize us as a group and a community. There are strong arguments to make to build as much as we can on a foundation of open data, data as a public infrastructure. Because the thing that fills me with hope is that our machines, much as we heard in the last talk, our machines plus us, algorithms plus data plus ourselves, can achieve remarkable results. And this is the result of the Nepalese earthquake, the mapping that was done by volunteer groups, filling in the background of a ruined country's infrastructure. Or the citizen sciences that we can do together. I'm less gloomy than some about the future of work. Humans are extraordinarily ingenious about giving ourselves things to do, meaningful things to do with our lives. In social care, in the creative medias, in the new kinds of professions that will emerge. There doesn't seem to be a huge sign. There will be translocations, of course, but I think that humans will always be extraordinarily adept at finding those niches where the human sociability is the thing that's required. Not least, there'll be an entire billion individuals with a demographic that is very aged in China needing some support. It won't all come from the machines. So there's your infrastructure for one part of the digital world in which there are jobs there that nobody ever thought of. Whose mother was a search optimization, well, perhaps they are now, specialist. So the final plug is quite simply that in 1967-68, Desmond Morris produced this wonderful book where he invited us to think about ourselves as primates. And we started with that original slide, the Australopithecine. What we're doing now is trying to revisit that in our current digital context. There are reasons to be concerned, but they are not because the machines will wake up, and they are not because we're going to be out of a job, slung on the ash cart of history anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Nigel. Amazing. I mean, the teddy bear, the AI teddy bear and the baby, you really kind of got my attention there. The ethical questions that you posed are huge. And I know you have a strong point of view about this, but who should be taking responsibility? Technology companies, governments, the individual, and practically what should anyone be doing or has been done that's actually more than just saying we need ethical AI?
Well, we do need, I mean, we need, that conversation will have a plurality of voices. It can't be dominated by one or the other. In a certain sense, our concern as individuals will be a serious part of this. Responsibility as innovators and developers, and in a certain sense, the people who are meant to keep us out of harm's way, our governments, will need to be thinking about this. And when we look at the deployment of advanced technology in the past, it had these deep ethical issues, areas like STEM, synthetic biology, human fertilization, and embryology. We did do the thinking ahead of the stuff being deployed, and we did come up with a notion of appropriate licensing, some regulation, what we felt the population at large would bear or need or support. So I think it has to be a plurality of voices.
And that final few slides there, I saw you at the Open Data Institute working with lots of potentially data scientists. And I'm curious, because earlier on you showed a picture of Michelangelo. And, you know, I think we're living in a renaissance, but you are working with lots of young students in computer science. And what are the tools that are going to enable us to create the next, you know, Renaissance, the next Leonardo da Vinci's and both male and female?
Yeah,
what should we be learning?
Well, I tell you one thing is that I think this concept of a digital enlightenment, the original enlightenment was about tolerance, and it was about trying to get authoritarian views of the world off your back. We're kind of in need of that again, I submit. That'd be a fine thing to get behind. And I think the issue of what tools and skills, one of the things that I find very striking is that computer science is, the skills in AI and data science are becoming hugely popular. They're very popular courses. They have a very interesting demographic. Lots and lots of kids from state schools do very well applying into our universities off the back of that. Great.
Why is this?
Well, because it seems to be just, in some sense, they're taught this stuff. In some sense, it's a flat, you know, there aren't so many state schools that teach Greek and theology, you know, but there are that teach computer science. Our problem is more in gender, where we've still got a huge amount of work to do, which is why I'm very excited about the efforts to persuade and support and encourage more girls into the subject area. And I think as we talk about the human-facing aspects of everything here, that just has a much more stronger and natural resonance to children and to
Amazing.
kids.
Well,
Yep.
thank you, Sir Nigel. I think you were calling for a bit of a revolution there, which
Bit of a revolution.
I'll sound off. And we're going to continue our discussion now, getting deeper into the future of education. And please, a round of applause for all our future of work thinkers.
Thank you.
And